Hello and welcome back to Letting Off Steam, the podcast about all things STEAM. I'm your host, Kashvi, joined by my lovely co-host,
Daksha.
and today we are interviewing Khyati Garg. Khyati, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Khyati. I use the she, her pronouns. I'm currently pursuing my master's at MIT, but I did my undergrad also in the US from UC Berkeley in chemical engineering. And yeah, I'm born and brought up in the UAE, in Dubai, UAE. Yeah.
So, to start with, why did you choose the field of chemical engineering? What drew you towards chemical engineering?
I was always interested in everything environmental related. I usually like sum it up as energy and environment. So everything that helps produce energy and everything that helps preserve the environment. So I've always been interested in that space. And when I was doing my research for when I was applying to college, I realized that if I do choose chemical engineering, it like gives me a very broad base to pursue several of my interests in this field. Like for example, I could pursue plastics engineering, which would be like working with different types of plastics to make a more better or biodegradable plastic, one that's better for the environment, like keep improving that material. So that like I could work on plastics engineering, I could work on food engineering, which in one line is coming up with like, for example, lab grown meat, instead of like consuming actual meat. Um, then I was interested in also marine engineering for some reason. I loved animals, and I thought chemical engineering could get me there. It also like opened doors for me for petroleum engineering, which is everything to do with like how all of our fossil fuels are extracted and that whole process. So it was a good base for me to like branch out into all of these fields, even nuclear engineering, like chemical and nuclear are pretty linked. So yeah, so I decided on chemical because I hadn't like decided on what my interest was, and pursuing any degree in the US allows you that sort of flexibility despite your degree to do anything in your major and outside. So that is why I chose chemical engineering.
That's really interesting learning how broad chemical engineering is as a field. Speaking of chemical engineering, what is your favorite part about chemical engineering?
I think, okay, so there are a few things, but I feel like for someone who is very new to the field, working in a lab-based environment can be pretty exciting. There are like chemical engineering or chemistry as a field comes with like a lot of beautiful labs, a lot of messy and beautiful and like delicate labs, and working in that sort of like um clean um very like fragile environment as well as dangerous it can be quite exciting, and learning how to use all of that glassware and working with really dangerous chemicals and actually realizing that if you don't follow the safety you can die. Like people don't take safety procedures like seriously, but like if you're working in a lab, I think everyone does the entire like process required. So it's quite nice to work in a lab as a chemical engineer. Can be monotonous though, so after a while that excitement does die. So now what's exciting to me is chemical engineering's industrial applications, all of these factories that produce any and all goods, like be it our soft drinks, be it our like plastic bags, be it literally anything, that we have in our homes, any commodity, like are produced in giant factories, and all of those are like run through chemical engineering principles. And it's nice to see all of that running and be produced, and it's nice to know that chemical engineers play a nice like huge role in all of that. Yeah.
So you obviously studied at Berkeley, which is one of the best schools in the world. I'm sure with that excitement comes a lot of obstacles. What are some challenges that you faced while pursuing a chemical engineering degree?
Like, I was excited about Berkeley because it's a US university and it allows me to do everything. And I had a side interest in astronomy, and I was excited to be able to also do that. But coming to Berkeley, I realized that chemical engineering was one of the toughest degrees because we had like requirements that take up to 3.5, 4 years that don't allow a lot of space to do other things. So it was tough in that sense that I had a lot of classes to do, and a lot of the classes at Berkeley are offered semester wise. So like it's like they're only fall classes or they're only spring classes, and you have 2 semesters at Berkeley. So you have to take it at that time. It's not like you can take it whenever, because professors are available at a certain time. So you have to follow that schedule, even though people say it's like flexible. It's like that schedule, your class schedule, and the way to like enroll is sort of like fixed. You don't really have much of a say in chemical engineering. What was challenging is Berkeley is a public school. So there are a lot of students, even though my major was relatively small. When I say small, I say we had over 200 students in our major, which to me is small because in other majors at Berkeley, like computer science, there are over 5,000 students, you know, and those classes are huge. I thought my classes were huge, but those classes are way, way bigger. Like we have classes in stadiums, like they're that big. But yeah, it's challenging to be in a class with so many people because everyone's starting at a very different level. And often at Berkeley, because it's a public university, you don't have a lot of support from the faculty. Like you don't have a lot of professor one-on-one time or like time with like grad students. So therefore, in a public university, they encourage working in groups. And that sucks because everyone comes it doesn't suck. It's like quite a different experience because everyone's at a very different level and you need to like learn to work together and catch up if you don't know where everyone's at. And everyone who enters Berkeley is amazing in something. So that was pretty challenging doing group projects and working on everyone else's schedule. It's also tough that at Berkeley it's quite competitive in the sense everyone is facing imposter syndrome, which is that, oh, I don't feel like I belong here, but at the same time, everyone's doing like 10 things. It's like a weird balance that everyone somehow maintains. Everyone is doing 10 things. When I say that, I mean like they're doing three clubs where one club they're like they've co-founded, or they're one club they're like the vice president or president of, or they're part of like Greek life where they're like rushing or responsible for the whole fraternity or sorority. And then you have your classes or like people TA where because it's a public institute, a lot of undergrad students have the opportunity to teach. So people are doing that. Then people are recruiting and doing internships the moment they enter Berkeley. And there's community service and there's sports. People are doing all of that with classes. And it's like normal. If you're not doing all of that and you're not in like so many clubs, it's weird, you know? So like it's difficult to maintain a balance with all of that at Berkeley. But it also like it puts you in a good place to do 10 things at once. So yeah, that was challenging and fun. And yeah, that was that.
It was really interesting to listen to the challenges you faced at Berkeley. How would you describe the chemical engineering course at Berkeley at undergrad level?
Yeah, like I mentioned, there are a lot of courses that chemical engineers have to do. Like we have a lot of requirements. Um, to be specific, like for example, chemical engineering, at Berkeley, there are several concentrations you can pursue. Like I said, I had several like interests, right? Those were niches that I could get into from the chemical engineering space. So like Berkeley had some concentrations of its own that are broad enough, as well as like can be tailored to your like needs. So like one of them was energy and environment, which is what I really liked. And there was biotech, there was computer science, there was materials engineering, there was nuclear. So you could like choose that like, concentration and like do classes in that field to complete your chemical engineering degree, which was nice. You can always take class. You can always make a concentration of your own and like choose that I want to do both and take classes. That also works. You just need to talk to your advisor. So there's a good like variety of classes. Another thing I completely miss, but people also do research at Berkeley. Berkeley is one of the finest research institutions, and that's what people do first at Berkeley when they come try to get research opportunity because there's so much research going on. um, Chemical engineering also has a lot of research opportunities in the fields like I mentioned. There's like biotech research, there's a lot of like organic chemistry and materials, blah blah blah, blah, like a lot of research. So like a lot of undergrads get chosen to do like in all of these groups doing this research to like work in labs and help like conduct these repetitive experiments, take care of like lab equipment because it can be, like I said, can be monotonous at sometimes. So like doing all of that like drag work is what undergrads are like usually, kept for. But yeah, it's quite nice. But like Berkeley, chemical engineering at Berkeley is very research focused rather than industry, which is something I feel like undergrads, when they apply, should look into. Like some universities, like for example, Imperial College of London has a great chemical engineering program, but their program is very like aligned with industry standards. So they have a lot of industry partners, and therefore the projects or like capstone projects they have are linked with industries, which is great for people who are trying to go into industry. But Berkeley, if you want or not, will put you on a path of research because that's all that's happening at Berkeley. Like when it comes to like the science research, but Berkeley is well linked to industry partners when it comes to like computer science and data science. But yeah.
That's very interesting. I know you've touched on it a little bit, but what are some future applications do you think there are to like chemical engineering? And what are some future applications that you wanted to go into from chemical engineering?
Yeah. Yeah, like I mentioned, chemical engineering has a lot of options. Um, you can choose to when you're studying chemical engineering, which is basics of engineering, and then they focus on like how things are really produced. You can like that could mean a lot of things. Like you could go into biotech, which is how vaccines are produced or your medicines, and how all of those trials work. So you need chemical engineers or biotech engineers who would work in all of these labs to test all of these medicines and drugs. So that is one big field now, like that chemical engineers pursue and quite like lucrative. Um, then the other field that I really like that it hasn't quite caught on because people don't do chemical engineering and then work in climate change. But I think it's a great transition because as a chemical engineer, I understand how different sources of energy are generated. And therefore, I understand the full process and I understand what needs to be changed. Like, for example, when we say the fossil fuel industry is very carbon intensive, I understand what that means because I know where those carbon emissions are coming from. So I like that chemical engineering allows me to understand this broad statement to that much detail. And chemical engineering again can be very lab focused. The lab can be a very clean lab. Like clean lab is a term. It's not like me saying that the lab is clean. Clean labs are just like very high-tech environments. And it could be a clean lab or it could be an industrial lab. And all of these labs, like an industrial lab could mean that you're making beverages, and testing all of those beverages and making all of that equipment where the pipes that all of this flows through, the pressure, the tanks, everything. That's chemical engineering. And you could also, like I said, work on a culture of cells it could be like stem cells, it could be for cancer research, it could be to make lab grown meat, it could be like, it's the full spectrum, you could choose to do whatever. And chemical engineers also often work on materials engineering, which is broadly like working on optimizing materials and discovering new materials for different purposes. So there's a lot of things you can do in the realm of making things better for me or just running things in this world. Yeah.
That's very fascinating. This like hearing about chemical engineering. Well, we've already touched on this before, but you have been to Berkeley. And how would you describe student life at Berkeley?
Yeah, it's quite when I got into Berkeley, I remember I was not keen on going because when I like did my like research, I like learned that Berkeley has, I don't know about a high depression rate, but like is quite depressed as a university. And I like heard that people are like, struggling there to like do like 10 things, and quite a bit of homeless population that are students, and there's also a suicide rate or like a dropout rate. All of these things is quite like common at Berkeley. So that is not something I was very drawn to because I was like, I don't want to be at a university that's going to destroy my mental health. But I feel when I went there, it wasn't like that. I feel like most students who get in know how to deal with that sort of pressure. Like I had mentioned, it's very common for students here to do 10 things like that, but also at the same time face imposter syndrome. And it's definitely a race. Like, if you're not doing all of those things, you will fall behind and you will be nowhere. So like it is quite rigorous. Like I remember I visited Dartmouth University for my grad school just to like see if I should go there. And I remember going to the libraries, and during the tour guide was like, excuse our libraries are full now because it's exam season. And when we entered the libraries, they were empty. And that's very different to like how Berkeley's libraries are, because Berkeley's libraries are full. People live there 24/7. And be it exam season or not, people are studying all the time. They're also having fun. I think Berkeley students, like a good 1/4 of them, hit a really, really good balance. But yeah, I feel like Berkeley being such a big university, there's so much going on. Everyone has their niche, everyone has a group here. I love the diversity aspect of Berkeley being a public institution. It cares about anything and everything. And if a student has something that they want to do, I feel like they're able to do at a public university, because I feel like a public university is a very student university, you know? Like if you go to Berkeley, when you walk around Berkeley, you will think that it's a student university, because everywhere you'd see like graffiti, but not in a vandalism sense, and you'll see like posters, like, or like club invitations, or like, just like it's a very student campus, and I love that there is character. But like if you go to a private institution, like I will be going to MIT, you can tell it's very corporate or very administrative, because you don't see students, outside singing, or like, playing the drums, or like having a cake, like pie in the face competition. You have all of that in Berkeley on a regular. And if you're having a bad day, if you just walk around Berkeley, it'll make you feel better, because there are just students everywhere. And I love that.
That sounds like a wonderful experience. Obviously, recently the UC admission rates have dropped. So, what are some like advice? What is some advice you would give to people who might consider applying to Berkeley, or people who are just starting their applications this year?
Yeah, I feel like it always helps to get in touch with the admissions officer. And I personally think when you get into Berkeley, you need to hustle. It's not the type of school that will give you everything on a plate, because they have a lot more resources than students. It's not like that. It's definitely the opposite. You have a lot more students than the resources you have to offer. So you need to grab what you like, grab things. It's like first come, first serve. So like, so I definitely still think it's a great school, because it like teaches you things the hard way, and people should like apply, um because the UCs as a whole is a very big research institution. There are a lot of labs attached to the UC system if you are interested in research. And as a UC student, you're free to work at any UC if you'd want. Like, you're a part of the UC system if you get into any school, you know, and that's a big resource. You have access to like 9 universities. So that's a great thing. UCs are in California. California is a great place to be. It definitely is a bubble, but a good bubble, like a good bubble. Like you can be in your own perfect world, sort of thing. It's a great place to be. Great weather. When you're applying to the UCs, I feel the UCs, or like the better UCs, Berkeley, UCLA, they expect you to have your own fire, that you've done your own initiative, be it like y'all are doing podcasts, or like I definitely think having your own entrepreneurship like venture is something that really attracts Berkeley, because it gives you that space to do whatever you want from scratch. So having all of that for Berkeley is good. In your application, I think UCs really care about knowing why you want to do your major. Um, a lot of people, though, to Berkeley at least apply undeclared. So knowing as a broad that this is what you want to do is something that the UCs really care about. Um, yeah, any other advice? If anyone has any specific questions, I'd love to like connect them to resources or professors. Professors love talking to students. They love talking about their work. And if you know by now as an undergrad that this is what you want to do, and you find a professor at Berkeley or any of the UCs, reaching out to them and talking to them about your interest and their interest could really, really help. Um, yeah, and they like that you're doing 10 things, I guess. Yeah, and taking initiative. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, this entire interview was very informative. Thank you, Khyati, for lending your time to us. And for the viewers, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.